before we read this verse. The previous verse, I was happy to see, is as follows: Vrindavane Krishna Seva Vaishnava Achar Bhakti Smriti Shastra Koriha Prachar. And although Prabhupada takes slight liberty in his translation, he says the translation is, this is Lord Chaitanya speaking to Sanātana Gosvāmī, telling him what he should write about in his books. And he says, establish devotional service to Lord Krishna and Radharani in Vrindavan. You should also compile bhakti scriptures and preach the bhakti cult from Vrindavan. Okay, since tomorrow is Radhastami, so we're getting ready, okay? That's the idea. So Prabhupada says to Sanātana Gosvāmī, this is one of the things he should establish, is devotional service to Lord Krishna and Radharani in Vrindavan. All right, now today's verse. No, that took me to where I am. Let's try that again. It's taking me back and forth. It's not taking me forward. Why is that? No. It's a little bit subtle. Oh, your machine just lost its job. Thank you. This is easier to read. Yes, we should not be attached. This is one of the points. Whoops, but it's going to fade on me. Okay, here we go. Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila. Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila. Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila. Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila. śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila. śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila. śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila. śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila. Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila. Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila. śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila. śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila. Others?
Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila.
Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila.
śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila.
śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila.
Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila.
Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila.
śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila.
śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila.
Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila.
Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila.
śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila.
śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila.
Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila.
Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila.
śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila.
śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila. Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila. Yukta-vairāgya-sthiti saba śikhāila. śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila. Very good. Yukta-vairāgya of of proper renunciation. Sthiti, the situation. Saba, all. Śikhāila, instructed. Śuṣka-vairāgya, dry renunciation. Jnāna, speculative knowledge. Saba, all. Niṣedhila, forbade. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu then told Sanātana Gosvāmī about proper renunciation according to a particular situation, and the Lord forbade dry renunciation and speculative knowledge in all respects. Purport. This is the technique for understanding śuṣka-vairāgya and yukta-vairāgya. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, yukta-hara-viharasya yukta-cheshtasya karmasu yukta-swapna-vabodhasya yogo bhavati tukkaha. He who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains. You know this word mitigate? To reduce. To mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. To broadcast the cult of Krishna consciousness, one has to learn the possibility of renunciation in terms of country, time, and candidate. A candidate for Krishna consciousness in the Western countries should be taught about the renunciation of material existence, but one would teach candidates from a country like India in a different way. The teacher, Acharya, has to consider time, candidate, and country. He must avoid the principle of niyamagraha. That is, he should not try to perform the impossible. What is possible in one country may not be possible in another. The Acharya's duty is to accept the essence of devotional service. There may be a little change here and there as far as yukta-vairāgya, proper renunciation, is concerned. Dry renunciation is forbidden by Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu, and we have also learned this from our spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj. The essence of devotional service must be taken into consideration and not the outward paraphernalia. Sanātana Gosvāmī wrote his Vaishnava Smriti, Hari Bhakti Vilasa, which was specifically meant for India. Shri Panchatattva Ki Jai. In those days, India was more or less following the principle of smarta vidhi. Srila Sanātana Gosvāmī had to keep pace with this, and his Hari Bhakti Vilasa was compiled with this in mind. According to smarta brahmanas, a person not born in a brahmana family could not be elevated to the position of a brahmana. Sanātana Gosvāmī, however, says in the Hari Bhakti Vilasa that anyone can be elevated to the position of a brahmana by the process of initiation. Yatha kanchanatam yati kangsyam rasavidanata tata diksha vidanena dvijatvam jayate rinam. As bell metal is turned to gold when mixed with mercury in an alchemical process, So, one who is properly trained and initiated by a bona fide spiritual master immediately becomes a brahmana. There is a difference between the Smarta process and the Goswami process. According to the Smarta process, one cannot be accepted as a brahmana unless he is born in a Brahmin family. According to the Goswami process, the Hari Bhakti Vilasa and the Narada Pancharatra, anyone can be a brahmana if he or she, I would add, is properly initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. This is also the verdict of Shukadeva Goswami in Srimad Bhagavatam. Kiratahunandra pulinda pukasha abhira shumba yavana kasadaya yenye chapapa yat apashraya Shudyanti tasmai prabhavishnave nama. Kiratas, Hunas, Andras, Pulindas, Pukashas, Abhiras, Shumbas, Yavanas, and members of the Kasa races, and even others who are addicted to sinful acts, can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord, due to his being the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisance unto him. A Vaishnava is immediately purified, provided he follows the rules and regulations of his bona fide spiritual master. It is not necessary that the rules and regulations followed in India be exactly the same as those in Europe, America, and other Western countries. Simply imitating without effect is called niyamagraha. Not following the regulative principles, but instead living extravagantly, is also called niyamagraha. The word niyama means regulative principles, and agraha means eagerness. The word agraha means not to accept. We should not follow regulative principles without an effect, nor should we fail to accept the regulative principles. What is required is a special technique, according to country, time, and candidate. Without the sanction of the spiritual master, we should not try to imitate. This principle is recommended here, śuṣka-vairāgya-jñāna saba niṣedhila. This is Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu's liberal demonstration of the bhakti cult. We should not introduce anything whimsically without the sanction of the bona fide spiritual master. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments on these points by quoting two verses by Sri Rupa Goswami from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Anasaktasya vishayan yatarhan upayunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yukta-vairāgyam uchyate prapanchikataya buddhya hari sambandhi vastuna mumukshubi parityago vairāgyam palgu katyate. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. On the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. Unquote. To preach the bhakti cult, one should seriously consider these verses. And so ends Srila Prabhupada's purport to this verse, which is, again, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is instructing Sanātana Gosvāmī what he should write about, and it seems that some of what is recorded here as being for Sanātana Gosvāmī seems to have appeared also in Rupa Goswami's writings. And specifically these two verses at the end of his purport. These are kind kind of paribhasha sutras. They're, I would say, really very important for our whole approach to Krishna consciousness. So I think it's very useful to reflect on this idea. What is meant by yukta-vairāgya as opposed to śuṣka-vairāgya? What is the Slovenian word for dry? Suha. Yeah.
When dry leaves make sound, it's called the śuṣka.
Śuṣka. You see? We are already knowing so much Sanskrit. Huh? Okay. So I want to first look a little bit closely at this verse from Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu. Anasaktasya vishayan yatarhan upayunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagyam uchyate. And we just heard Srila Prabhupada's translation of this verse, and I'm going to offer another translation. This is from His Holiness Bhanu Swami, from his translation of the Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu. And it goes like this: the vairagya, that is the renunciation, of that person who employs objects suitable for devotional development while remaining detached from them is said to be suitable for bhakti. You know this word suitable? It's suitable, it fits, it works. The objects should be persistently related to Krishna. Now the word persistently, that is the word nirbandha. Maybe can we put that verse up, which was at the bottom of the purport? Can we scroll back down to the bottom of that purport with our high-tech screen? There, no, further. Keep going. There we are. Very good. Thank you. Yeah, so you see in the second line, nirbandha Krishna sambandhe. Krishna sambandha, you know this sambandha, right? Relationship, connection. And so Krishna sambandha, related to Krishna. And how should that connection be? Nirbandha, it should be persistent. Persistent. And we can say the key word in all of this is vairagya. And uchyate at the very end is kind of indicating that what we're getting here is a definition. Uchyate means it is said, it has been stated. So it's kind of a definition. It's going to be a definition of vairagya, but of a particular type of vairagya, namely yukta-vairāgya, right? Yuktam-vairāgyam. And the word yukta, we hear this word a lot, because it's very much related to the word yoga. We all know what yoga means. Yoga is very popular. Everybody does yoga nowadays. Everyone is a yogi. Yoga studios are all pervasive. They're even in China, and they're very popular. But actually, most people don't know what yoga means. Yoga, they think it means, exercising. Yoga means connection. Actually, yoga can mean a lot of things, but in this context, it can mean connection or linking but also it has the sense of engagement, and so yukta is just another grammatical form. It means engaged. Engaged vairagya, engaged detachment. Now this could sound like a contradiction. Engaged disengagement, right? Because vairagya means detachment. It can also mean disengagement. So engaged disengagement? How is that? And so the rest of the definition is explaining. First of all, it's speaking about the person who is having the qualification, who is having the adhikar to practice yukta-vairāgya. Anasaktasya, the person who is detached. Whoops. What about us? Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjata. Upayunjata, yunj is also related to yoga, to yukta. Upayunj, of one who is engaged, of one who is detached, of one who is engaged. So now we have a person who seems to be in opposite places of being detached and being engaged. It's getting, the plot is thickening here. And what is this person doing? He's doing something with detachment, with vairagya. Well, no, he or she is doing something with vishaya, with objects. Objects, of course, doesn't have to mean just physical objects. It can also mean all sorts of things. Any sort. It can mean concepts. We can be attached to ideas. Usually, our strongest attachments are for persons. So then the question may come: how does this go along with the idea of engaging persons? Engaging others, does that mean making objects of other persons rather than seeing them as subjects, as persons? That could be problematic, right? Then are we talking about detachment, or is that some kind of attachment? A lot of questions come up, but the general definition that we're getting here is that there is something called yukta-vairāgya, and it has to do with, or it's possible to realize in relation to Krishna when we somehow or other engage things in Krishna's service. Okay, well that we all know that, right? Now I wanted to I did a little research. I looked at this verse in the Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu to see where it is. Where is this statement in relation to what else is being said? It's nice sometimes to get a context. What's the broader point that's being made, right? So this is in chapter 2, or wave, the second wave, where Śrīla Rupa Gosvāmī is explaining. He's explaining sadhana bhakti, and he's giving a long series of verses explaining about the different angas of sadhana bhakti. There's 64 angas. There's lots of things we can do to serve Krishna. There's no point at which you can say there's nothing more to do for Krishna. Because as soon as you've done all 64 of Rupa Goswami's items, it's time to start over again. Because you've just filled up the day, and the next day has come. You can be very busy in all these angas of devotional service, right? so toward the end of that discussion, then comes this verse. And what Rupa Goswami is explaining is he's just making the point that vairagya is not an anga of bhakti. In other words, as he explains in the very beginning of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, bhakti is independent of everything except bhakti. And so he's just confirming that point. But then he's doing something else in order to highlight that still this yukta-vairāgya is a good thing, it's useful, even though it's not an anga. And then he gives the second verse. Prapanchikataya buddhya harisambandhi vastuna mumukshubhi parityago vairagyam palgu katyate. He's giving the contrast, the opposite, something that's, you could say ayukta vairagya, but he's giving a bit stronger word. Palgu has the sense of small and superficial and insignificant, valueless. So palgu vairagya is way opposite to yukta vairagya. He's explaining. So we have a sense, okay, there's something called vairagya, and you can do it in a good way or in a useless way. And to know the difference helps a lot. Now it's time to tell a true story about myself, to wake everyone up. This was several decades ago. I was serving in the Amsterdam temple, and I somehow got the idea in my mind to make spiritual advancement, one needs to reduce one's eating. And so I did some fairly serious reduction of eating. Prabhupada said, he says in at least one lecture, he says, reducing, eating, sleeping, mating, defending to nil. Okay, well then, let's get started. I've told, some of you may know this story, but I was reducing, maybe, I don't know, significantly. But then one day, suddenly, my nose started bleeding. And somehow this came to the attention of the temple president. I mean, it's not such a significant thing that somebody's nose, that a devotee's nose bleeds, maybe. But he was a very caring temple president. Why is your nose bleeding? What have you been doing? Well, maybe it has to do with that I've been eating a bit less. Aha! Okay, so now we're going to solve this problem very quickly. We are now putting you on a new diet. And he was aware, he was remembering, actually he himself, the president at that time, was also from America. I was from America. And so he knew that Americans, somehow we are raised on sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So he said, I order you for the next 2 weeks, every day, to eat 10 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Hare Krishna. I was a very surrendered soul. Simple brahmachari, the temple president has ordered, I must follow his instruction. And it worked. No more No more bleeding nose. His particular motivation, I believe, was to keep me going on Sankirtan, book distribution. In any case, it worked. So that was śuṣka-vairāgya that I was trying to practice. I've never done that again. Anyway, we find that this question comes up in many contexts. They can be personal, they can be more in a group, in a temple, and in our society, ISKCON society, or even more broadly, the Hare Krishna movement. What is appropriate and what is not appropriate renunciation? So this is something that Srila Prabhupada discusses in the purport we've just read with regard to large geographical areas, right? He says renunciation in Western countries may not be the same as it may be in India. Mind you, Srila Prabhupada wrote this some decades ago, and I tend to think that at least in the cities in India, it may have come to be the same issues. Because city folk in India have now a lot, maybe more in common with Western city folk than with Indian village folk. In any case, he's speaking on this very broad level. Now, I have a few things more to say, but I'm a little concerned about the time, and I wanted to hear what our schedule is. When should we have the cutoff point? When we pull the Swami off the asana? Am I already 15 minutes late? Huh? No. Okay, so what's the cutoff point? 20 minutes. Okay. Approximately. Yes, okay, good. Well, let's read something more from Srila Prabhupada explaining about this point. He says in a purport in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 9, verse 28, one who acts in Krishna consciousness under superior direction is called yukta-vairāgya. This was something Prabhupada emphasized in the purport we read. Rupa Goswami says that as long as we are in this material world, we have to act. We cannot cease acting. Therefore, if actions are performed and the fruits are given to Krishna, then that is called yukta-vairāgya. Actually, situated in renunciation, such activities clear the mirror of the mind. And as the actor gradually makes progress in spiritual realization, he becomes completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I just want to say this we may take as a kind of test for some thing or some activity or some whatever it is, because we ask ourselves, is this yukta or is it shuṣka? And usually it's on the yukta side. We want to include everything and say, yes, it's yukta-vairāgya. And so we can ask ourselves with this test, is it clearing the mirror of my mind? Is this engagement actually clearing my mind? Is it actually making me surrendered to the Lord in such a way that the particular engagement, the particular object, whatever it might be, we feel genuinely detached from it? I think that's a nice test. And, if we're a little honest with ourselves, we may have to say to ourselves, well, maybe not. Maybe it's not having that that effect. I've as I mentioned in the beginning, come to this question about yukta-vairāgya through the question of what has come to be called bridge preaching. I don't know who originated that expression. I believe it came from the BBT when there was discussion about whether certain books should be published or what sort of book a book might be. For example, a cookbook. A vegetarian cookbook that says something about Krishna consciousness. Okay, let's call it a bridge book. I believe that's the history. And then from that came, well, then there's also bridge preaching. We hear sometimes devotees very strongly and with good intent and with very good points condemning bridge preaching. That bridge preaching essentially means mission drift. You know this idea? You're on a boat and somehow you let go of the oars, and now you're left to the drift of the current. And so there is a concern, and it's an appropriate concern, that if we're doing too many creative activities, perhaps imperceptibly, or maybe very perceptively, drifting away from the original mission. That's the anxiety. There's another anxiety, though, and that is that we hold so tightly to what we understand to be the mission from everything that we take to be the mission, that we end up standing on a little island, and the rest of the world goes by and leaves us, as we say in English, high and dry. Dry renunciation. Not having caught the point that our acharyas, one of the functions of our acharyas, is to open up, to creatively show how to extend, how to reach out to people with Krishna consciousness. And one can go on and on about how our tradition is a tradition of bridge preaching, but I won't do that. But I want to take one or two examples from one very dear god brother of mine who very sadly has just left the world, but very joyfully in Vrindavan just a few days ago, His Holiness Gunagrahi Goswami, whom I got to know in South America, in Argentina, a wonderful, super dedicated devotee. And I came to know, not just from speaking with him, but later, after his departure, I came to know from others some more glories of Gunagrahi Maharaj. And two of these aspects I want to share now, because I would say they're very nice examples of positive bridge preaching. The one has to do with in our day, we used to say rock group, the music group, Shelter. There was something of a movement, a musical movement in the early 1980s that continued through the 80s into the 90s called Straight Edge. And these people, these young people, were protesting against the indulgence in drugs and alcohol and such in the youth rock music scene. They protested against that. They said, no, we're stopping all of that, and we're going to preach that one should stop all these things. And part of this movement also got into vegetarianism and veganism and so on. And there was one person in that movement, a musician, who became a devotee. His name is Raghunathas. And Raghunath decided at one point that to be a good devotee, because Srila Prabhupada was preaching about simple living, high thinking, that he should go to Gitanagari farm and serve the cows. And so that's what he was doing. And then Gunagrahi Goswami found out Raghunath Das, who is a straight-edge musician, he's now in Gitanagari serving the cows. Well, that's very nice, but come on, he's Raghunath. He can do so much preaching to attract young people to Krishna consciousness. So Gunagrahi Maharaj went to Gitanagari and he sat Raghunath down and said, Prabhu, it's very nice what you're doing, but you've got to get out of here. You have a service. You should be doing that totally mad music. And so he was convinced, and that's what they did for. And then Gunagrahi Maharaj traveled with him, other devotees, and in this way they had very effective preaching. So many young people came from that. He was able to do this, Gunagrahi Maharaj was able to do this because, as several devotees have said, he had a sense, he could see when someone was a potential devotee. Even though that person may have seemed to be so unqualified, so unlikely in so many ways. And so this leads to the second story. At one time, Gunagrahi Maharaj was the temple president of the San Diego temple. And one day, Gunagrahi Maharaj met a young man who he immediately started thinking, he's a devotee, he's a devotee, he's a devotee. So he started chatting with him, as preachers will do. And he asked him, so what do you do? What do you do? How do you spend your time? Oh, I'm a painter. Painting walls, not art, but just, painting. I'm a painter. Gunagrahi Maharaj immediately said, oh, you're a painter. We have a room in the temple that needs painting. Do you think you could come and do it? Yeah, I guess so. Okay. So Gunagrahi Maharaj arranged, they bought the paint, they bought the equipment. Here's the room, can you paint this room? Yeah, okay. It took him a week to do everything. And by the end of the week, he was a devotee. He stayed in the temple. Now, the interesting thing is that room absolutely did not need painting. I realize that it's a little dangerous that I've said this, because from now on, devotees are going to be suspicious of what the temple commander asked them to do. But remember, you're already a devotee. Hare Krishna. working on being devotees. So even if it would happen that the room doesn't need painting and we're asked, can you paint the room? We can also say, yes, why not? Anyway. Okay. So these are two examples, and we could, again, we could think from our own experience. What is it that we are engaging in devotional service, which is helping the mission, which is, and what is it, we have to also ask ourselves, that may be actually an obstacle, that may be hindering us. One last point, and then I'll see if there's any question. From some of the explanations of Srila Prabhupada to this anasaktasya vishayan, he seems to be saying two things. One is, for the very advanced devotee who's described in the verse, the one who is detached, the one who is on the Uttama Bhakti platform, yukta-vairāgya is a phrase for explaining what such a devotee is doing when he or she is stepping down to the level of preaching. In that process of stepping down, the devotee is helping the one who is not yet practicing devotional service or who is beginning in devotional service with some helping hand of objects or situations or, yes, painting the walls or playing the straight edge music or whatever. And then the person in the lower position is getting helped up by the same principle, yukta-vairāgya. So there's a meeting, and that meeting point is the middle, which is explained in the Bhagavatam, Ishvaretat adineshu, balisheshu dvishatsucha, prema maitri kripopecha, yakarotisa madhyama. Srila Prabhupada explains our movement, our society is about cultivating this middle level of devotional service, which is devotion to the Lord, friendship with the devotees, kindness to those who are unfortunate, and keeping a distance or keeping aloof from those who are inimical. So if we see that as our aim, then we can, I think, keep a clear idea of how yukta-vairāgya, how we can apply it in an appropriate way, in a suitable way, yukta. Hare Krishna. I'll stop there. Any questions or comments? Yes. Carol. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. There are things that are important to me in life, and some of them I am able to connect with Krishna, but at the end of the day, when I look back, how much energy, how much was there left of things that I wasn't able to. There's 1-2% or something like that. Then the things that are important to me, and I'm not able to connect with Krishna, that's how to deal with that. Maybe I can imagine how that would be, but I think I need perhaps a new hint or something.
Need what?
Some encouragement or some hint, some extra new hint, because I might be able to imagine, but from time to time things come up that are still there after a long time, and yes, they are important to me, Because for some things it's easy to connect. It's important to me, okay, important to me, important to Krishna also. It's easy to link.
Yeah.
But at one point this stops.
Yeah, yeah.
What then?
Ah, indeed. Okay. Did everyone get the question of Jainitai? Well, one thought comes to mind is we may not see the whole picture. We see the present time, we see something of the past. We don't see the future. And it could be, of course, it depends what sort of thing you're thinking of. It could be that will be just the right thing at some time in the future to move your Krishna consciousness forward. It may indeed be hard to imagine now, but it just might be just the right thing. I would just say that what we're attempting to do as devotees is to put the primary focus on what is it that will bring me to being attached to Krishna and the service of Krishna. And so we, as you say, we recognize, we acknowledge, I have all of these attachments. I have some talents, I have some capacity, I have some abilities. I want to also engage them in Krishna's service. That's nice, but the primary aim, the primary question that we want to keep in the forefront is what is going to give me real engagement, attachment to Krishna. My dear Lord, if there's something from my attachment, something from my abilities, from my talents that you find useful, please engage. Please let me engage. Otherwise, if not, let them go. That would be my short answer. Dharma Prabhu.
I was listening to the internet few weeks ago when you explained about
then it's okay.
about bridge preaching, your seminar which you give soon in Hungary, and you also said that at the end of your speech that also devotees should be careful about this bridge preaching, that there is also sometimes dangerous to fall down under the bridge if devotee is not spiritually strong. So my question is, what is the qualification of the devotees to do bridge preaching? We know from the past, for example, famous Gauranga Bhajan band, this was also bridge preaching, but in the band there was 70% gurus, sannyasis who are very strong. I was at that time coming to that program, and I was very attracted with this music, and you were singing, Satyananda Maharaj was there, and so on. And this was very effective. So my question is, should all the devotees do this bridge preaching? Because we can see from the experience that
suddenly everybody
there is also big danger to fall down under the bridge. Or should these do only devotees who are spiritually strong and experienced and so on?
Yeah, suddenly everyone wants to run out and buy an electric guitar and a drum set and or whatever. Okay, again, the short answer, as devotees and as Prabhupada emphasized, we're doing everything under superior guidance, under superior direction, and under superior blessing. And so this is always the principle. The example I gave of Raghunath Shelter Gunagrahi Maharaj, there was the senior devotee. Raghunath was the younger devotee. they worked together, and kept Gunagraj Maharaj. He considered that his main service, to keep everyone on the bridge, so nobody was falling off the bridge. So he kept a strong sadhana with everyone. Yeah. So. All of these things, it's hard. You can't put numbers to. Oh, you've been practicing Krishna consciousness for 2 years. Okay, therefore you can now do this. Now it's been 4 years. Okay, now you can do the following. It doesn't somehow really work that way. The way it works is through guidance, through perception, and sometimes a bit of what I would say experimentation, in the sense that you may have an idea, let me see if this is going to work. I would like to do this. Let me see how this works. And you're still... you're holding on to the guidance of the senior devotees, and at the same time you're experimenting, but you're careful. A general principle of devotees is devotees are fearless except for one. We cultivate a particular fear. What is that? Yeah, we fear. We have Maya. A healthy fear. In the Christian tradition, they speak of fear of the Lord. Something like that. So, yeah. I would put it that way. But Sadhu Shastra Guru Vakya, the sadhus, the senior devotees, and Guru and Shastra. Hridoye Korya Aikya, then we get a sense in the heart of what's to be done. Yes. Hey, Mangi, go.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for such a nice class. I would like to ask you about...
Microphone. Coming.
Thank you so much for such a nice class. I would like to ask you about these inappropriate concerns about bridge preaching. What do you find as the most often, in our tradition, and how to overcome that thing?
What is it that might be inappropriate?
Yes.
That we are doing as a society?
Yes.
Oh. I would say, just off of the top of my head, I would say one inappropriate thing is that we tend to think of preaching as a one-way street. And so we think that we're going to go out and save the world if only the world would stop and listen to us. There's a problem there that nobody wants to listen to someone who doesn't care about them. And caring, one way we show that we care for someone is, believe it or not, that we listen to them. And when you're listening, then there can start to be an exchange. When you're listening, then that person may want to listen to you. And then gradually, and surprise, surprise, you might just find out that there's something that you can learn from them. Imagine that. So I think this is something of a... there's a missionary spirit, which is very good, but there's the downside of that, which is, and it leads to a kind of blindness that we don't see how others see us, and we don't see them. So where is the illumination? Where is the light coming? So that's why I'm also giving these talks about what I call dialogical Vaishnavism. That was a little plug. But that's in short. Yes. Hare Krishna, we've passed our time limit. So I will end there and say thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day today. And Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Panchatattva ki, Gaur Premanande.
HH Krishna Kshetra Swami Maharaj ki.